Good afternoon and welcome to Think Science. I'm Nathan Cohn with Texas Public Radio. At each of these quarterly talks, our goal is to bring you in and out in an hour, having learned a little bit more about the subject at hand. And our focus today is on the future of meat. Right off the bat, I want to thank TPR's Paul Flav and Ellen Evans from Green Vegetarian Cuisine for helping me make the connections to bring you today's guests. And today's Think Science presentations made possible by San Antonio Kidney, San Antonio Vascular and Endovascular Clinic, the City of San Antonio Office of Sustainability, and the Edwards Aquifer Authority. Today's presentation is being recorded. It'll be archived on YouTube and also posted later at tpr.org so that you can share it with a friend, because there's likely going to be something that you hear today that's going to inspire you to take action. And that's another great thing that we love about our Think Science presentations here at TPR. People have been eating meat for thousands of years, and in America, when the founders of this country arrived, they found abundant land that allowed them to herd and cultivate livestock like never before. And at the turn of the 20th century, as our country moved from more agrarian and rural society to a more urban one, those tastes for meat remained. And the factory farming industry that came out of this was born to keep the supply up and keep it cheap. And regardless of how you feel about the use of animals themselves, and let's face it, factory farms are pretty hellish, the fact remains that giant factory farms lead to pollution, diseased herds, and great global challenges like deforestation and climate change. There has to be a better way to enjoy the tastes we love in a more responsible manner, and we'll be looking at 3 innovations today with our guests. Each of these great presenters will offer an overview of their work, what they do, their research, and I know that what they'll have to say will spur some great questions as well, which you'll be able to ask today. You're welcome to type your questions in the appropriate window on this webinar here. There's a chat function there, and we'll relay your questions to the presenters when it's time for the Q&A portion of today's event. So let's hear from our first presenter today, and that is Michelle Collette, a Trinity University alum, go Tigers, and head of food service at the Livrely Collective, which is a plant-based protein business. Welcome, Michelle. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Well, thank you, Nathan, and thank you for having me today. I'm thrilled to be here and also representing Trinity with you, Nathan, so thank you. Well, today I'm going to be talking about the company I work for, which is called the Livrely Collective. And as we think about the future of meat, we have to understand that perhaps the most obvious choice as an alternative to of actual animal meat would be our plant-based meat alternative. So I'm going to walk you through a quick presentation of plant-based general meat alternatives, and then talk a little bit about the company that I work with and some of the products that we make, in hopes to inspire you to ask some questions about perhaps how the product's made, how it's functioning in the space, and anything else that you may be curious about. So if you'll just give me a second to figure out how to share my screen, I would love to do so. Well, let's go. All right, so back to plant-based meat alternatives. So I'd like to introduce you to the Livrely Collective, and you'll be hearing about a number of our brands, but we are a collective in which we have multiple brands. And as you can see, I'm wearing one of our brand's shirts today called Like Meat. And so I'm going to take you through a little bit about our company and also simply why plant-based. So when we think about the future of meat, there are many different options and different avenues that perhaps our society will go down. But perhaps the most obvious that we're faced with today is plant-based meat alternatives. So why plant-based? Well, if we think about our consumer, about a third of US consumers have lowered their meat consumption over the past year, driven primarily by the increase in the flexitarian diet. So what is a flexitarian diet? Perhaps you're not 100% sure you want to go vegetarian or vegan, but you are plant curious. So we call those individuals flexitarians, and we think of it on a spectrum. So those who are heavy meat consumers, those who are vegan, and everyone in between. And as people become more and more plant curious, we start recognizing that they're choosing different meat alternatives, including plant-based chicken or plant-based meat, like burgers. So if you also think about what we just went through in our historical society of going through quarantine together, we realized that many people went one way where they were very indulgent, but many, 44% of consumers actually decided to be more healthy during that period. So plant-based really fits into that sentiment. When we think about trends, there are the flexitarians. Many people are curious about the transparency about where their food may come from. Sustainability, localism. We want our food to come from close to where we live. And if you think about these different trend buckets, plant-based definitely fits into many of them, if not all of them. So let me tell you a little bit about the Live Kindly Collective. The Live Kindly Collective was formed in March of 2020, right before we went into quarantine. And what it was, it's a sentiment of individuals who felt very empowered to make plant-based living the new norm. And to do that, we've raised quite a bit of money, in fact, over $500 million in private equity funds. And then we've gathered the great minds of global leaders across the world and also entrepreneurs of outstanding businesses, brought them together under one umbrella of a collective, and then have inspired those across the world to make plant-based living the new norm by offering products in both retail and food service applications in over 30 different countries. So the company is just now launching into the US in 2022. And I will show you our 5 different global brands. So they represent 5 different countries. And as we look to enter into the US, we've chosen our brand Like Meat to inspire those in the US to try plant-based meat alternatives, specifically in the chicken category. So by combining these global businesses together, we've kept our founders and entrepreneurs of these different brands, combined them with our global leaders, and together we have over 75 years of combined global expertise and R&D in the plant-based meat alternative space. So whereas many of the companies have come together with a new idea, or big conglomerate companies like Tyson and Morningstar, they may have lots of different experiences. With the Live Kindly Collective, we are truly dedicated to plant-based meat alternatives with the most expertise in the category combined. Our mission really is to transform the global food system from seed to fork by making plant-based living the new norm. So plant-based living, the new norm, what does that really mean? It means having the opportunity to experience and have availability of the products to really transform the way you're living to make it more healthy. And our impact speaks volumes. So combined with all our brands globally, we've saved not only many animals' lives, but we've reduced water consumption, helped with CO2 emissions, etc. And so if you think about the impact, it's exciting to come together as a global brands, but really what makes a difference is the consumer. And so getting the products out to the consumer is really what we're all about, which I'll talk to you about in just a second. So sustainability is our business model, and we think about upgrading beliefs, habits, and the food system. And when we look to do all of those things, I'm going to talk specifically today about habits. Habits are when we go to the grocery store and pick up the chicken that we've picked up for the past 20 years, right? We need to provide a product that is easily switched out, right, for a common recipe that you're already cooking, because with that one trial, making it super easy for people to implement into their diet at home, it could really make the biggest difference. And when we think about upgrading our food system, it's great to have a product that's easily switched out in the grocery store, but we want to ensure that the product comes from a sustainable supply chain. And with Like Meat, we use soy. And so I'll talk a little bit about what that means and how the product's produced. But from the Live Kindly Collective, we really do a great job of having a full supply chain model of seed to fork, where we're planting seeds into the ground, cultivating those, milling them, processing them through our facility, and then turning them to products that are easily transferable into your everyday diet, whether that be through the grocery store or at a restaurant. So let's talk a little bit about how we make our plant-based chicken. So as I mentioned, we have our seeds, and then we mill them into a powder. We put them into water, and we have a unique process called high moisture extrusion. And the picture on the far left is actually the machine of the extrusion. It combines pressure and water, and it takes that soy product and turns it into a really exciting fibrous structure that gives us a sensation of chicken. It's very simply made, and it's with very simple ingredients, which I'll show you in a coming slide. We can take that product and either use it just as a chicken fillet as it is, or we can cut it up and put it together into forms and create all sorts of fun shapes in order to entice little eaters or even those who are less curious and want something more indulgent to enjoy the product. So we work with many different manufacturers across the world of ingredient manufacturers to get the best flavors, the best breading, and to keep it as natural and wholesome and nutritious as we possibly can. I'll also mention that there's a second type of application to make product like this, and that's called TVP technology. And many of our competitors, and even we do have some products that are using this textured vegetable protein type like form, which gives the product a little bit more of a bite, a little bit spongier if you've had product like that. And it definitely has its space and is often used in a chicken nugget type application. So let me introduce you to Like Meat. I put up some images of our retail packages, which feature our Like Meat pieces, which are exactly those pieces I was talking about that have the fiber structure to them. They function like shredded chicken, and they're very, very simple ingredients and are rich in protein and higher in fiber than our meat alternative. We also have created chicken wings, which take that product, chop it up, and form it together to make these little drummies. We call them wings with no bones to pick. So with Like Meat, we're really targeting consumers that are the mindful meat lover, people who love to eat meat but want to make an impact in some way, shape, or form, whether it be for animals, the environment, for their own health, whatever their calling may be. We want to make it accessible and easy to access to switch out whatever product that they were accustomed to eating. So if you're at a football game and you want to have some chicken wings, if you switch out to like chicken wings, you may not even know the difference. So 3 main ingredients make Like Meat chicken so exciting. One of them is that, like I mentioned, is that texture. That fiber structure really does give the sensation of biting into a chicken. The form, it's familiar. We want something that's juicy and crispy and exciting to try and be incorporated into any other kind of meal that you would typically be eating. But it's got to taste great too. And that's what our Like Meat chicken really does deliver on. It tastes like chicken. And so if you're excited and ready to eat chicken, right, this product, it could be easily switched out and is delicious. So our pieces, again, are made with this high moisture extrusion process, which gives us a wonderful sensation of texture and taste that's closest to real chicken. It's clean label and gluten-free, and it was, like I said, created with a mindful meat lover in mind. And it really is we're able to take this product and put it on a menu or put it in the grocery store and make it an easy swap for chicken, whether you put it on the grill, sauteing in a dish, putting it as ingredient in soup, etc. So again, it's easy, it's irregular shape. It looks like shredded chicken. It is gluten-free, lactose-free, it's soy-free. I mean, it's GMO soy-free soy, and it's rich in protein and fiber. And I wanted to just show you how simple the product really is. It's really water, soy protein, oil, flavors, salt, and yeast to give it a little bit of a juicy bite. With low calories, high fiber, it's a great source of protein. Just up close, I wanted to show just exactly what that fiber structure looks like and what the high moisture extrusion process can really deliver from an application standpoint. And if you'll indulge me, perhaps we'll see a video, but it's just a quick little commercial and brings the product to life. So that wraps it up. I really wanted to give you just a high level view of why plant-based is part of our society today, a little bit on how plant-based meat alternatives fit into that picture, a little bit about the Livrely Collective and our brands, and to give you an idea of how the product's made and what it delivers to our consumers. So with that, Nathan, I can pull my screen down and we can take any questions.
Thanks, Michelle. And first up, in your video, you need to tell that guy he needs a napkin. You know?
I agree. It's supposed to be messy.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, you know what, let me follow up with one quick question here, and we'll be moving on to Dr. Katie Kam in just a second here, but I'm just curious, how are the tastes developed for plant-based meat? I mean, I know, I recognize that probably a lot of the people that work for the companies are, you know, vegetarian or vegan, and so do you have to have somebody, I mean, this is going to sound like a dumb question, but do you have to have somebody on staff that A/Bs it with meat in order to basically, you know, get that same mouth feel and taste?
It's true. So we work with flavor companies, right, who specialize in sensory data and understanding which type of flavors do replicate the chicken products themselves. So we work closely with them. We get to a formula that we believe is going to work because there's a little bit of masking that goes into masking the plant protein flavor and then also enhancing that with umami, you know, flavorings and different satiating, you know, textures and bites that actually are enhanced by the flavor. And then, yes, we do have lots of flexitarians on staff. So we have many who are very passionate vegans and many who are vegetarians, and then those who consider themselves flexitarian. And I'll tell you though, as people, you know, move through the organization longer and longer, they tend to move on that spectrum a little bit more towards that vegetarian vegan side of it. But yes, we do have our food scientists who do both, and then lots of taste panels, and then we do many consumer taste panels as well with flexitarians.
And I think one of the other things that's probably seems to be a hallmark of these meats, and something that I know that companies are trying to reduce, is the amount of sodium I think involved with them. Because you know, when you see those nutrition facts and it's like a lot of sodium in there, is that something that, you know, companies are trying to work on as well, is to make them even more, even plant-based meat be a little bit more heart healthy and stuff?
Absolutely. So with the pieces that I spoke about, it is higher in fiber, higher protein, and lower sodium. Because we're able to use those flavor enhancers that are an alternative to salt or MSG or any of those other, you know, types of flavorings or applications that may enhance the sodium. What comes into play is really the breading. So as anybody, if it's a chicken nugget or you know, even ours, the breading can have quite a bit of sodium in it, and that is always the goal, to use the same flavor application to reduce the sodium in the breading.
Good. All right. Well,
Great
let's
question.
thanks, Michelle, and let's see if we can get Dr. Katie Kam up now and have her sharing her screen from BioBQ out of Austin. All right. Oh, turn on your microphone. Don't forget.
I'm not getting an option to, okay, now I've got it. Okay. All right, you should see my PowerPoint slide.
There it is.
Yay, okay. Yeah, so I have 3 screens. That makes things a little more complicated. Okay, all right, so I am Katie Kam. I am the CEO of BioBQ, and we're based in Austin, Texas, and we're here to create a new generation of barbecue. And I'll explain a little bit more about what we mean by a new generation. My co-founder is Dr. Zoldan, and I will explain a little bit more about us later in the presentation. I do want to point out that I'm a vegan and she's an omnivore, and it's this nice little win-win solution we've come up with trying to make meat eaters happy, but at the same time addressing concerns that there are with slaughtered meat. So we're based in Austin. I'm sure this happens in San Antonio. People wait in line for a long time for barbecue meat, so barbecue meats are in demand. But as we generally know, slaughtered meat is a very inefficient, costly, and problematic process. So we believe cultured meat is the solution. And by cultured meat, I mean we actually take very small biopsies from cattle. We get the muscle and fat cells, and we culture those cells and scale up to get enough yield of cells in order to recreate muscle and recreate the meat that people are used to. So this is a cleaner process. There's no slaughtering involved. It's literally in a very clean facility, cruelty-free. We don't have to, no animals are killed in the process. Less environmental impact. We're not having to deal with the waste associated with animals. And we're not having to dedicate a lot of land and water to the feeding of animals. This is a much more efficient process. Also from a time standpoint. So instead of it taking months or years to raise an animal, this only takes a few weeks to raise or to create the meat. So BioBQ aims to be one of the major global producers of whole cut barbecue meats, and the first in the world to produce slaughter-free 100% beef brisket. So that'll be our first product. We're not interested in the ground meat market. There's some other cultured meat companies that are focused on that. So we're really focused on those whole cut meats. We expect cultured meat demand to increase and displace conventional slaughtered meats. And the vegan meat is expected to continue to grow and displace conventional meat, but there's also this thinking that there's going to be kind of a ceiling to that because there are people that absolutely love meat, and they'll find vegan versions of it just not satisfactory from a taste or texture standpoint. Yeah, I'm vegan. I'm super happy with vegan meat, but there are others that prefer the sensory experience of meat. So that's where cultured meat steps in and says, okay, let's provide the meat that you are demanding, but let's do it in a more efficient, environmentally sensitive way that doesn't harm the animals. So one question I get is why brisket as a first product? Nathan mentioned that, yes, I'm vegan now, I was vegetarian in 1998, but before I became vegetarian, my family would weekly go to barbecue restaurants here in Austin. I would get brisket. I haven't had brisket in over 20 years. And then I also know that beef brisket is an incredibly popular product. And so the other nice thing about it too is it's a challenging product, and I like challenges, and this is going to be an interesting cultured meat product to produce. We're the only cultured meat company in the world working on beef brisket. And there's a couple other interesting things about beef brisket. The second highest growth rate. It has increasingly become a more popular barbecue meat, and it also has a very unique flavor and fatty acid profile. There's some research out of Texas A&M University that outlined how the fatty acid profile actually there are some benefits to actually beef brisket from that standpoint. So it's been an interesting time to have a biotech startup during a pandemic, but we were able to secure lab space during the pandemic. And within 6 months' time, we were able to grow a chunk of meat, and that's what you see there, the third photo. Well, it's a couple chunk of meats. It's 100% meat there, so there's no plant fillers, nothing in there except just meat. And so we're in the process right now of scaling it up to like a full-size brisket. That's going on in the lab right now. And just to get a little bit of the science behind it, when we get a small biopsy from a cattle, we culture the cells. And the unique thing about muscle cells is they're called adherent cells, which means they need something to grow on. They need like a base. They can't just float in a liquid or something. So you have to create a scaffold to tell the cells what to do. So we have a patented scaffold method that cues the cells to grow in alignment, just as we expect in muscle tissue. So if you look at muscle tissue, all the muscle cells are in alignment. That makes sense because when we're trying to move our body, move our muscles, all the cells need to be coordinated. So that's the reason there. Okay. So as I mentioned, we're the only one focused on beef brisket, and then later we'll add other whole cut barbecue meats. We have this patented method that aligns the muscle cells, and I'll elaborate a little bit more on why we align the cells. If you look at whole cut meats, unlike ground meat, there's a very defined meat grain, and in order to recreate that, you need to get the cells in alignment at the cellular level. And so that's what you see visually there to the left. The other interesting thing we found happen in the lab is that when you cue the cells to grow in alignment, it actually makes the cells really happy and you get more cells growing. So it increases the cell yield. And the other thing too is we know you can't just culture muscle cells and expect it to recreate the muscle that you expect, because in cattle, especially with brisket, which is in the shoulder region, the cow is moving that muscle. And so the texture and the resulting sensory experience does tie back to that muscle being exercised. So we know that in our process, we're going to have to include some type of electrical mechanical stimulation, and having those cells aligned supports that stimulation, supports that exercising of the muscle. The other cool thing about our technology is that we can remove the scaffold. And so we aim to create 100% cultured meat products. So we would make slaughtered beef brisket indistinguishable from our cultured beef brisket. And the other thing I want to point out about our company, like I mentioned, we're the only one focused on beef brisket. We also are located in barbecue land, so we're excited to produce this here in Texas and start distributing it to restaurants when ready. So our product release plan is, we are also working on what we're calling a blended brisket product, which is plant fungi based with some cultured cells incorporated. And the idea behind that is to give us a little more time to work out the technology to create the 100% cultured meat product, and also give consumers an opportunity to start eating a meat product that has cultured cells in it. So we're aiming for late 2022, early 2023. And then the 100% cultured meat product would be more later 2023, early 2024. We've looked at the numbers with beef brisket. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And our go-to-market, like I mentioned, is we would first like to go to market through barbecue restaurants. And the idea is that we'd have, our logo and name next to the brisket, so that when you go to a barbecue restaurant, you can go, oh, I want to try this 100% cultured meat brisket. So one of the common questions I get is, how are we going to get this cost competitive with slaughtered beef brisket? We definitely want to be cost competitive. And so we've run the numbers, and there are two things that will really help us get down to similar costs to slaughtered brisket. And one is the cell culture media, which is a solution that we have the cells grow in. And we're looking at both B2B, business to business offerings. There's a lot of other startups that are very focused on particular aspects of the cell culture meat process. And so we've been engaging in a lot of collaborative back and forth on, looking at what those companies are doing to see if we can incorporate it into our process. And then the other thing we're looking at is reprocessing or replenishing the media. So we reduce the quantity of media that we need. And then also, one thing we quickly found out when we were trying to price out the capital investment needed, like equipment, bioreactors are very expensive. And so we're working on designing our own custom lower cost bioreactors that are specifically designed to help us create that beef brisket. And I do want to add, a lot of times we don't consider the costs of slaughtered meat are not complete costs. There's a lot of costs that are pushed to the general public, whether it be pollution, roadway damage from all the transportation of cattle. So I do want to point out that compared to slaughter meat, cultured meat is going to have dramatically less water and transportation costs, because we're not transporting a pound of brisket that's, in cattle all across the state to all the different facilities it goes to be processed, and then finally to the final facility. We just have one facility where meat demand is, so, one in each city to create the cultured meat and then just distribute it to the restaurants there. We can also ask this question about what does the FDA and USDA think about this? They're actually on top of this. They came up with a formal interagency agreement in March of 2019, where they decided what aspects of the cultured meat process that they're going to oversee. So this slide summarizes that. And they haven't finalized any formal rules yet. That's an ongoing process, but they're expected to have something towards the end of this year for us to look at. In the meantime, there are other cultured meat companies focused on more ground meats or cultured fats that have already going through the process and hope to get some type of green light to move forward with them. I do want to point out that brisket's our first product, but we do plan to go to other whole cut meats like loin, rib, chuck, etc. All right, a little bit about me. Nathan gave a little bit of an introduction, but I'm a vegan, and I was motivated to get into this because growing up in Texas and then eventually becoming vegetarian and then vegan, I tried to convince family and friends to join me on that path of becoming vegan, and I just couldn't convince people. They just love barbecue meat. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I see this as a win-win solution for me to be able to end animal slaughter and reduce food production's impact on the environment, while at the same time my family and friends can enjoy meat. And I love this role that I have here because this is my second business. I had an engineering firm where I love taking something from conception through design to regulatory approvals to implementation. So I'm really enjoying this process, and it pulls from my background in biology and chemistry and planning and civil engineering. And for my co-founder, Dr. Janet Zolden, she's an associate professor at the University of Texas at Austin, and the scaffold IP we use at BioBQ came out of her lab. She has lots of experience, 17 years in stem cells, tissue engineering, and biomaterials, so it's perfect for what we're working on. And so I'm excited to have her on board. And we also have more helping us out. So we've created a collaboration ecosystem where we work with major Texas universities, including in meat science, to help us in the R&D. And then we have a professional crew that's giving up their time to help us out while we're busy fundraising. And I also have several interns that came to me, and that's the incredible thing about this is the younger generation is definitely very excited, enthusiastic about culture and meat, and so they've helped create substantial contributions to R&D. And I just want to make a note that we are fundraising right now. We're looking to scale up and out. Like I said, we're working on the full-size beef brisket at this time. And so, yeah, that's it. And we've been in the news. We were featured in Texas Monthly in 2020, which was great. That gave us a lot of, generated a lot of interest in what we're doing. And we're looking forward to being in the news more as we launch the product. And I'm super happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Katie. And yeah, we'll have, I want to remind people that if you do have a question, you can type it in the window, the chat window there, and we'll relay them to the presenters, and we'll get to the full Q&A section towards the end of this hour. But let me just follow up with one quick question, Katie, and that is that, you know, you talked about, you know, scaling up to get a full-size brisket, and one of the things, and I love seeing that little piece that was in there in that slide right there, that almost like nugget of brisket there. So really, I mean, like, I guess this is like from like the lay person, like, how does it work? You know, I mean, like, what's the challenge to your biggest challenge for growing it into the full-size brisket?
Well, so we figured out how to make the cells happy and to get them to grow the way we want them to grow. And now that we're in this process of scaling it up to get them to the full-size brisket, we're now at the stage of, okay, we have this idea of how this is going to work process-wise. And so that's what we'll find out in the next few months. And if, you know, the process we're thinking of right now with the prototyped bioreactor and the scaffolding and you know, making sure that all comes together to recreate the brisket. So, and then like I mentioned on that other slide, you know, it's the two challenges are because brisket is a complicated meat. It's not ground meat where you can just like culture a bunch of cells and then bring them together and mash it up into a meatball or a chicken nugget or something. This is something with a very defined structure, very defined pattern. It has intramuscular fats and in between all the muscles. So we have an idea of how we're going to assemble what we call these cell sheets to recreate that brisket as people expect it. So that's what we're looking forward to finishing this year. And yeah, and then the other thing is just, you know, getting those costs down.
And do you smoke it with mesquite and hickory, just like any?
Yeah, that's the intention, is that people can do with this cultured beef brisket what they already do with slaughtered beef brisket.
Fantastic. All right, well, we'll have some more questions in just a few minutes from now. I want to move on to our third guest this afternoon, and that is we're going to move into an area where we're going to talk about an alternative to factory farming, agriculture, animal agriculture at a scale that allows us to keep the earth healthy and allow meat lovers to enjoy their favorite taste in a more responsible way. Lou Morman is the co-founder and general partner of SoilWorks, which is focused on regenerative agriculture. He spent previously to this 13 years at Rackspace, serving in a variety of roles, including board director, president, and chief strategy officer, while the company grew to $2 billion in annual sales. He's a native of San Antonio and received his BA from Duke University and JD from Stanford Law School. Thank you for being here and sharing your time, Lou. I'm looking forward to learning more about this. I saw a film last year that talked a little bit about regenerative agriculture, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what y'all are doing. Oh, your mic.
There we go. I appreciate it. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, excellent. Well, great to be here, and I really, can you see my screen still? Yeah, okay.
Yes, I can.
So, okay, I apologize. Super happy to be here. I'm going to, first of all, really enjoyed those previous presentations, and these are the kinds of approaches you hear about in the news every single day. There's a lot of innovation happening. I'm going to make a case for the good old-fashioned cow, and how we might be able to enjoy meat and feel a lot better about it. So, I think if you look in the press and in all the discussions today, we have this framing of the problem really around plants versus animals, and it's sort of viewed as plants good, animals bad. And I understand why that framing exists, but I'm going to make the case that it's actually the wrong frame. What we really need to be talking about is how we raise our food and the techniques that we use. So we've had an industrial food system that was built over the last 75 years, and it really was designed to build cheap calories. And they're not super nutritious, but man, we make a lot of calories and we make them cheap. And what's happened in the last decade or two is we've realized a couple things. One is we actually have too many calories. We don't have a dearth of calories. We have now an obesity crisis and a diabetes crisis. And any societies that are struggling from caloric intake, it's usually a political problem. It's not a production problem. And we also are realizing that we are not growing food in a sustainable way. We actually have to sort of grow food in a better way. And there is such a better way. It's called regenerative agriculture. And I think this is going to be the next great trend in food and in agriculture in this country. And at least I'm hoping so, and we're working hard to make it happen. So I'm going to walk through how this might work in the beef industry and how it's working today. We're actively engaged in this. But let's start with the industrial system. So, how are animals raised in the industrial system? Well, it starts on ranches, and all animals end up spending some time in their lives on ranches. And the historical way of grazing on ranches looks something like this. And what you see here is a classically overgrazed grassland. You see kind of dead grass. There's going to be low root structure there. There's exposed soil. This is very unhealthy land. It's not great nutritional profile for the animals. And in fact, it's very unhealthy for the animals because they're eating so close to the ground. And this is why we have to feed them dewormers and other types of drugs. So this is how it starts with a lot of degraded land and unhealthy animals. We then move them to the feedlot, which of course we all have terrible images in our minds of the feedlot, and it really is a very unnatural, unsanitary place for animals to be. Well, so how do we deal with that? Well, one is we give them more drugs. You got to give them a lot of antibiotics to keep them from getting sick as they're in these unsanitary environments and they're in close quarters. And secondly, you got to give them hormones. They're going to typically be highly stressed in these environments. So you give them hormones to make sure that they actually do continue to grow and perform from a meat production standpoint. Okay, well, what else do we do in these feedlots? Well, we feed them industrial plants, mostly corn and soy. And this is where I think the dichotomy or the framing of plants versus animals is a little bit off base. If you look at the industrial plant system, well, it's also very bad for the environment. It relies very much on petroleum-based inputs, fertilizer, and then a host of chemicals, herbicides, pesticides. You end up killing pretty much all of the organic life, not to mention birds, insects, small animals, and then you're running combines over these fields. This is a very, very big environmental problem. You get massive runoff, fish kills, bee kills. All this stuff is caused by the industrial plant system. So I'm not going to talk about how you could do regenerative plants, but this actually is also part of the industrial beef system because I think about 20% of the industrial crops and commodity crops end up in feedlots feeding to animals. And it's part of the problem we have with the industrial system today. And of course, the last part is you have a ton of waste. In these feedlots, you're going to have animal waste that ends up being very difficult to deal with, hard to contain, creates a lot of methane emissions, and can leak into our water system. So look, this entire system is a mess. So I'm not here to defend the current system. And there's a lot of good reasons why the beef industry is criticized as being unsustainable and unproductive. So what is this better way? Well, you got to go look to nature for inspiration. And the truth of the matter is, and this is against our intuitions, but we have about 650 million acres of grasslands in this country. They're non-arable lands, and they are grasslands. That is their natural ecosystem. And before we got here and started to change this ecosystem, we had between 80 and 100 million buffalo and millions of elk. Well, these are ruminants, and only ruminants can digest and eat grass. And the truth of the matter is that these grasslands co-evolved with these ruminants. They need to be grazed. They just need to be grazed properly. And when we had big wide open spaces, they could eat the healthy parts of the grass and move on and let those ecosystems recover. But this is the natural system, and this is what we need to keep healthy grasslands. In fact, the Audubon Society has this expression I love, which is today they say no cows, no grass, no birds. This is actually part of the natural ecosystem. So given we live in a world where we have property lines and fencing, how do we replicate this and restore our grasslands? Well, we use the ruminants we have, which is cows, and cows are great at producing food, and they're wonderfully efficient ruminants. And there is a way to graze them that replicates their natural grazing patterns, and it's called rotational grazing. It's a foundational keystone to regenerative grazing, which you basically put the animals on a fresh patch of grass. You let them eat the healthy part of the grass, and then in 12 hours or 24 hours or 48 hours, whatever, depending on how much forage is on that land, you move them to the next piece of grass. And it's a super simple. You drop the fence and the animals will move into that fresh grassland, and they get fresh grass. And what you do with that pasture that's just been eaten, you let it rest. You let those roots grow. You let it recover quickly, and you keep that organic matter cycling through it. And what else do you do? Well, this is a cow patty, and this cow patty has got dung beetles on it. And dung beetles, there are dozens of species of dung beetles that have evolved and grow to consume dung and to put that dung back in the soil. So they take dung, they tunnel it into the soil, and they bring nutrients and critical microbiology into the soil to keep the organic matter growing. So if in an industrial system, this doesn't happen because the animals are being fed dewormers and other chemicals that are noxious to these critters. So in a natural system, all of this is cycling through, and the waste of the animal is actually rebuilding nature, rebuilding soil, and bringing organic matter to life. You also get deep-rooted plants and grasses. And what does deep-rooted plants do? Well, photosynthesis is the greatest carbon-sucking technology ever invented. It's been around for millions of years. And with deep roots and healthy soil and quick-growing grass, you will actually sequester carbon. So well-raised regenerative grazing operations can take their carbon soil levels from 1% to 12, 14%. This is enormous amounts of carbon that can be sequestered in the soil if they are grazed properly by mimicking nature. And at the end of the day, you end up with robust, healthy, vibrant grasslands, which is the biggest ecosystem we have in the world. It will be home to incredible amount of ecological flora and fauna, as well as sequestering carbon and retaining lots of water. One of the reasons we have such bad flooding is because not only our parking lots that exist in our cities, but our grazing lands have become parking lots because they have inorganic soil. And this is just an amazing recovery that can happen, and it can happen quickly if you engage in this properly. And finally, the output is the most nutrient-dense beef you can possibly consume. So these animals are not eating corn and soy, which they're effectively allergic to. They're eating grass, which is what they've been evolved to eat. And you have absolutely terrific, great food that is raised ethically. So this is happening right now. This is one of our products. It's called Wholesome Meats. It's in HEB here in Texas. And there are many, many more companies and products that are engaging in this regenerative supply chain. This is the change I think we need to make, is that we definitely have a problem with our food system, but there are answers. And what we got to do is look to nature. Nature gives us the answers, and we can work with nature, not against nature, to make great food and take care of our environment. So if anyone has questions, you can reach me here. We are a $40 million fund that is investing exclusively in the regenerative protein space to try and build a supply chain that can produce great food that works with nature and do it at a competitive price. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Lou. That was terrific. And we got the last 10 minutes of the hour here. So if everybody wants to turn the cameras back on, we'll do some questions from our audience here. And Lou, let me just start off with you right off the bat here. This all sounds very, great circle of life type way to be more sustainable about raising beef. And I also know that the current state of affairs, what you were led at the beginning at, and what I did as well, is so great of a problem here. But how can you convince? How can we get more farms to be working in this manner in the country? I mean, and is it something that like you can, I guess, have enough of? Also leading with the fact that you said we already have enough. We're too much.
Yeah, Nathan, great question. I mean, I think that this is a good and fair criticism or question: is can it scale? Can it actually scale? And I think the answer to that question is absolutely yes. If you look at the ranchers that have been doing regenerative grazing for more than 5 years, they are typically have carrying capacities double their neighbors. So the animal units that they can grow on their land is actually double on the same land, and you're getting all the ecological benefits. So you're producing more food, having more profitability, and creating all these ecological benefits, and doing it on twice the animals. So right now we have so many grasslands that are not even being grazed at all. They're sitting there fallow, and in fact, they're dying by not being grazed. We need to have ruminants on these lands. We can also turn 100 million acres of cropland back into grasslands, natural grassland ecosystems, by doing this. So there's enormous acreage that can be turned into it. The way we got to do it is we got to show ranchers that this is the way they can make more money. Many ranchers are showing them that that is actually possible. We also have to create a market for it. We need consumers to demand it. If consumers are demanding this, ranchers will respond. So this is part of the change that has to happen. Look, organic went from a farmer's market industry to a very large industry over the last 20 years. We think the same thing that can happen in regenerative, and ranchers will respond because they will be able to make more money.
So that leads me into my next question, and one from the audience here that is both for you, Lou, as well as for you, Michelle, and then I guess eventually for you, Katie, which is, people are asking, well, where can we find what it is that you're doing? Like in stores, how do you, et cetera, et cetera. So let's start with you, Michelle, and then we'll go to you, Katie.
So our Like Meat brand, you can find it in Sprouts. There's 60 HEBs that have it in Texas. And then Walmart also has about 1,600 locations, and all Sam's Club have the Like wings right now in the club pack, which I highly suggest. So, and it comes with sauce. You'll enjoy.
Lou, how about the Wholesome? Where is that available?
Yeah, so I mean, we're in most HEBs today, selling ground beef. You can buy cuts of meat from us on our website, getwholesome.com. And there's other brands that are emerging and coming into the market. So Force of Nature is an Austin company that is selling regenerative bison in Whole Foods and other places. So there's more brands coming. I think every supermarket in the next 5 years, I think every supermarket is going to have a regenerative beef line. And we'll be some part of it, but there's other brands emerging that I think are going to make this available. You can do a search online too and find a number of providers.
Katie, you mentioned starting in restaurants with your product, and I think that seems to be the way to go. It was for a lot of plant-based meats like Beyond and Impossible. They started in restaurants, and now you can find them in grocery stores. So where are you looking? Maybe I mean, are you like talking to Rudy's or something about stuff, or what's the deal? Oh, your microphone.
We're gonna, as we get closer to having a product that these restaurant chains can try, we'll start talking to them. We do have one restaurant chain in Texas that they have 16 restaurants. They've already written a letter of support. They have interest in the product. They want to test out in their test kitchen once we have it ready. So we've already seen some traction with support from barbecue restaurants. We do plan to have, before launching into restaurants also, we do plan to have taste testing events, which is allowed. And there have been a couple other cultured meat companies, again, they work on completely different products that have done that in the US. So we intend to do that as well as soon as we can.
So that leads into another audience question for you, Katie, right off the bat is, as a vegan, have you taste tested the meat itself, and what was that like?
Yeah, so my co-founder has, I have not, because not because I don't want to, it's just we have a small sample and it's better to have the meat eater on the team try it out to see how it is. And yeah, so she tried it. It says it's chewy. The first brisket bites that I had in the PowerPoint slide, those were 100% muscle, so there was no cultured fat. We are culturing fat in the lab now. So meat definitely benefits taste-wise by having some fat incorporated. So our next prototypes are going to incorporate both muscle and fat cells, and so that should help the taste. But in terms of putting something in our mouth and chewing it, it was, yeah, meat-like. And yeah, I'll eventually try it, but I am going to be a terrible judge of the meat because I have not had meat in over 20 years. And so it's just not going to be, I'm not going to be the best judge of it. So yeah, I've got other people to test out for me.
One other question for you, Katie. Where do you get your cows to extract muscle cells, and how does that impact the cows? Are those biopsies painful for them, somebody asked, or is it just a small sample, or what do you do?
Yeah, good question. So I'm vegan. I'm very concerned about animal welfare. I oversee, we work with a vet and a cattle rancher to get these biopsies. Cows don't seem to notice that they're got a small needle into them, like a stick maybe they ran into in the field or something. So yeah, it's not a process I'm concerned about for the animal welfare. And because it's under the direction of a vet, they're taken care of. It's, you know, the area is cleaned and there's a pain relief, so it's fine. Yeah, but the idea though is to create a cell line to where we don't have to keep going back for biopsies, and the frequency is very, very low. And kind of I want to mention something to Lou is that we are curious to see if it matters when we get biopsies to get the cells. Does it matter if we get it from cattle that have been on grassland versus, you know, fed on corn? Does that change the cells in some way and to change how we grow them in the lab? So that's kind of an interesting research question that we would love to explore.
Yep.
Lou, I have a question, another consumer-based question here. So when somebody is looking for meat that is regeneratively raised, or they want to look for something that is done in a more sustainable manner, especially if they're going to someplace like, you know, farmers markets and the like, what are the questions that somebody should be asking? What are the words that people should be looking for that key people towards knowing that what they're buying is being done in a more sustainable manner?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, right now the biggest category is grass-fed, of course. Now this is tricky because a lot of I mean, every animal is grass-fed for some part of their lives, and so a lot of people can just throw that claim on there, even though they're spending a lot of time on a feedlot. So you know, then there's grass-fed, grass-finished. I think the thing you got to make sure is, do the animals spend their entire lives on pasture? That's the first bar that has to be crossed. So there can be grass-fed, grass-finished, but they're getting grass/soy pellets in a feedlot, and that can still be called grass-finished. So to me, it's really important they spend their entire lives on pasture. So that's sort of the baseline. I think the next piece is, do you perform regenerative practices? And this is, you know, in the farming community, any farmer will know what this means. They will be able to answer those questions. They might not advertise it in their booth because the consumer doesn't know yet, but they will be able to answer those questions, and they can talk about how they are taking care of the land and the animals at the same time. But I think the first piece is, has this been on pasture its entire life, is the most important question for now.
All right. Well, we're coming up on 1 o'clock here, and I want to say thank you so much to Michelle Collette from the Live Kindly Cooperative, Dr. Katie Kam from BioBQ, and Lou Morman from Soilworks. We appreciate your time and sharing the news of what y'all's organizations are doing today. Thank you very, very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we want to thank also San Antonio Kidney, San Antonio Vascular and Endovascular Clinic, the City of San Antonio Office of Sustainability, and the Edwards Aquifer Authority for their support of Think Science. I hope that today's discussion has inspired you to investigate more about this topic on your own. And once again, we will be posting this on our website next week so that you can watch it again, share it with a friend. There's more resources on the page. I'll have links to all this as well. Once again, I'm Nathan Cohn. Our next Think Science panel will be coming up in August. We'll be doing it in person at our headquarters here in Texas Public Radio. We'll be talking about summer health at that time. So don't forget, it's 1 o'clock. You should listen to Science Friday from 1 to 3 with Ira Flato on Texas Public Radio every Friday afternoon. And I just invite you to stay safe and take care of each other. We'll see you soon, okay?